card making friends, welcome back. Sandy here, and today I'm creating with the Waffle Flower Stamps Bouquet Builder 6 with their coordinating dies. Save these cello bags. You can use them for the edge-to-edge shaker cards, which I'll show you in a later video. Here's the stamp set with the beautiful florals, and I think we're going to play with these two today for our card. And here's the coordinating dies. And I love that they come on a magnetic sheet, so they're all ready to go. Just a quick tip about storage. I'm trying to reuse as much as possible, so here's how I store my stamps and dies. I close the sticky end of these cello bags that they come in, and I cut the other end off, the one that's got that sealed end with the little hanging tab on it. I cut that off so the opening is at that end, and then that way it's really easy for me to slide my dies, in this case, in and out. I've got my name and the code on the back if I need to know that, and they're just nice and easy to pile away that way. For the stamping ones, this has a flap on it, and sorry Waffle Flowers, but I cut that off, as pretty as it is, and I do the same thing. I put the card inside with the information on the back, and then the stamps can slide in there as well. For today's card, I'm going to be doing a little bit of Copic coloring, and I've got some sheets here that have my favorite colors on them. I'm going to be using these colors at the top for my leaves. Okay, so this is YG03, G02, and BG13, and I really like this color combination. It's kind of light with a little bit of a blue tinge to it. For my flowers, I'm going with pinks, and I'll explain a little bit later why. I have decided on RV10, RV13, RV14, and you'll see I have a fourth darker color there. I do end up pulling that in because I need it, and that is RV19. My ink blended background is going to be those two colors as well, which is why I chose them. Okay, I'm using my Misty to do my stamping. That way I can stamp a couple of times and get a nice dark image. I'm using the Gina K Amalgam ink because I really like that with my Copic markers. It doesn't bleed. And giving it a good rub, I am stamping on Hammer Mill 100-pound cardstock. Also love that. I use it for everything in my studio now. I do not have another white. It is so nice and bright, and it's great for all kinds of techniques. So we're giving that a good little stamp, just to make sure I have a nice dark image in which to color. And I'm going to leave my stamp inside my Misty, and I'm just going to set that and the ink and everything aside just in case I decide I want to come back and I want to stamp over again, or maybe I want to heat emboss. Then I'll be able to stamp it exactly where I need it. Okay, so let's start coloring. I'm going to be using my pinks first, RV14, RV13, RV10, and as I said, I run over and grab RV19 partway through. So there's a couple of ways that you can do your Copic coloring, and this is the first one where you start with the darkest color closest to the center of your flower, and I'm using the flicking technique. And I only really like to flick in one direction. That's why I'm always moving my paper. Now I'm coming in with a medium color, which is the RV13, and I'm flicking a little bit farther and blending the two colors together at the same time. So this is the dark and the medium that I'm blending together. And then I'm going to come in with the RV10, and I'm going to flick it even farther. I do not cover up the entire petal, though. I do leave some white showing. I kind of like that right now. I come and go with that. But on these flowers, I like a little bit of white showing. And I think it's going to help when we get into the darker background, which we'll do after we finish our coloring. Okay? So here's where I decide that I want the darker pink. So I run over and grab the RV19, and I'm going to use that in the center with the shortest flicks. So I'm adding that back in over top of what I've already colored. And then I'm going to blend it out with my RV10, which is my lightest color again, just to blend that in a little bit and spread some of that darker ink around. That makes me happier. I like that much better. My card is for the Misty Challenge over at Split Coast Stampers, and this month it is to use pink in your cards to celebrate Misty, and that's why I decided on pink flowers for this card today. So here's the other technique where you start with the lightest color first, which I just finished was my RV10. Now I'm adding my RV13, again flicking. And this time I'm flicking long and then working my way shorter because I'm starting with the lighter colors, working my way to the darker. So you do the opposite. So now I've got my RV14 and I'm flicking a little bit less. And then I think that I am going to come in with the darker color, and I'm going back over to the flower. And I'm playing with both of them a little bit right now because I'm adding a little bit of color to both. but I'm adding that RV19 to the center of the flower and the bottom of the tips of the petals that are kind of folded over, because there'll be a little shadow on the back side of them. And then I'm blending that out again with my RV10, which was a color I started with. And again, not covering the entire petal. Sorry, my camera goes out of focus a little bit because it focuses on my hand instead of the paper. Okay. So you're just going to continue on, and you're going to do all of the flowers this way. Up here, I prefer this method. I prefer to start with my light and work to the dark. I feel that the lighter color gets into the paper a little bit, and then it allows the other colors to sit up on top and gives me the opportunity to blend them a little bit easier. I find when I go from dark to light, I have a hard time moving the dark, and I usually end up having to do 2 coats in order to be able to get everything to move the way I want it to. So my personal preference, I know lots of people color the other way, and as I said, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so just adding the little bit of the RV19 into those partial petals at the top, and then we're going to do a few of the leaves. Okay, I have a spot where I went outside the line, so I'm going to come in with my 0 pen, which is my kind of what I call my eraser, and I'm just going to push that ink back into the petal. I sometimes go outside the lines when I'm doing videos because I don't have my head right over top of what I'm coloring. I keep it out of the way of what I'm taping, and so that's my way of fixing it. Simple little fix. Okay, let's move on to the leaves. We are going to start with the YG13, which is the lightest color of my blend for these. And again, kind of doing the flicking technique from the bottom of the leaf out. And then I'm coming in with my second color, which is the G02, and this time going part way up, about halfway. And then we're going to finish up with the BG13, which is the darkest of the 3 colors, and we're just going to flick a little bit of that from the bottom, and then come back in with the YG13 and blend these colors together. I really like the blue-green that these 3 end up making. And it's really nice. It really blends nicely. You'll see when we do our blended blue background for this card. So I'm doing all this at real time. For the rest of this, I'm going to speed it up a little bit here. So same technique for the rest of the leaves. You're just going to start with the lightest color from the center of the leaf, work your way out, and then you're going to blend in with the medium and flicking a little bit less, like halfway. And you can usually work on 3 or 4 leaves at a time, as long as you're quick. I like to work on them so that the ink doesn't dry. I find it easier to blend when the ink is wet. Adding my BG13, which is my darkest color. And then again, I'm coming back in and just blending it out with my lightest color, which is my G02. Okay, next up we're going to do our die cutting with the coordinating dies. And I'm going to line them up once I flip them over the right way. You'll notice I have tape on my left arm. This is Spellbinder's yellow tape. It's called Best Ever Craft Tape on their website, and it's awesome. It's really sticky, and you can use it 5, 6, 7 times, the same piece, while you're doing your die cutting. But when you first get it, it's super, super sticky. So stick it on your clothing, and it will pick up a little bit of fiber. Jeez, lost for words there. And it just helps it be not quite so sticky. So running it through my Platinum 6 with my Magic Mat. I love that thing. And popping these guys out. And I want to show you something that I really love about Waffle Flower's dies. They take the time to add the extra little bit of die cutting in between the stems and the leaves. So when you die cut it, you get this beautiful finished image, and you're going to be able to see the background through this, which I think really makes them look really realistic, and I just love it. Okay, speaking of backgrounds, let's build one. Waffle Flowers recently sent me a bunch of stencils and their new waffle mat, stencil mat. This thing's awesome. So you'll see that it's got a ledge on the left hand side and the bottom, and you pop your little piece of cardstock into that, and you see I'm not even holding on to my cardstock, which is so awesome. And then also, I say awesome a lot, don't I? I have my ink pad also sitting on it, and you'll notice that it doesn't move around while it's sitting on there either. I just love this mat. If you are having a hard time with your ink pads running all over the place while you are trying to do some ink blending, give this mat a try. I think you'll really like it. I sure do. So I'm using Hero Hues Reactives inks. I've got Blue Raspberry and Pool Party, and I'm also using their blending tool. And I've started with the Pool Party and basically covered the entire surface. Now I'm going around with the Blue Raspberry, which is a little bit darker teal, and I'm just doing the edges. And I'm showing you right now that I don't like to hold my blending brushes by the handle. I like to hold them by the head. I feel I have a little bit more control that way. And so I'm adding my edges around there and just coming in on the other side and doing the same thing. Nice easy ink blending. You'll notice that I'm not worried about it being even. I'm going to do a little bit of splattering, and we're also going to do some stenciling, and there's going to be flowers over top of it. Plus, I like that it's not going to be consistent in the background. I like white spots showing through. So I'm using their stencil, and this one is, what is this one called? This is called the Snowflake Background Stencil, but guess what? This isn't a snowflake card. The reason I like it, it's got large and small dots, and they're very random, and they're going to go really well with the splatter that I'm going to use in the background. So I'm kind of repeating an element in the background so that it's consistent, but I'm going to have it in 3 or 4 different colors, which is going to look really cool. So again, I'm putting a little bit of the Pool Party for the dots in the center, and then I'm coming along the outside edge with the Blue Raspberry and adding that there as well. And I'm staying away. I move my paper over to the center because there's an edge on the stencil that doesn't have any dots, and I don't want that on my card. So there we go. I decided at this point in time that the center's a little bit too white, and so I'm going to come back in with a little bit more Pool Party. But I've got the darker color on my brush, so I'm just going to grab a piece of paper towel and I'm going to rub it out onto my brush, onto the paper towel, sorry, and just get some of that color off so that I can go back to the Pool Party, the lighter. And I'm just going to do a very light blend over that to get rid of a little bit more of the white, and it still allows those dots to show through. So you'll notice the name reactive on these Hero Hues. That means that they react to different things like water. Almost the same as distressed oxide inks. When you splatter on them, you can see the splatter. It picks up the ink color and dissipates it, whatever. Same thing with these inks. So I'm adding a little bit of water, and then I'm picking it up with a paper towel, and it gives me a nice distressed watermark all over my card front. Love it. Okay, so next I've decided my next layer of splatter is going to be white. So to that paint, I am just adding a little bit of white paint and a little bit more water, and I'm going to mix that all together with my watercolor brush. And I have to work a little bit of water in there to make sure that it'll splatter because it's pretty thick. And this is just acrylic paint. Any type of acrylic paint works for this. And adding a little bit more water because it's not sloppy enough yet. And I practice usually on my acrylic handle that I've got sitting there, and I can tell that it's still not splatterable. Is that a word? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm getting some good splatter this time. So protecting the rest of my work surface, and I'm just going to slap a whole bunch of that on there. And big and small drops, I like having a mixture. And then we're going to let that dry. Okay, I'm a pretty big fan of gold splatter. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat this morning. And I like to splatter pretty much everything. So I'm getting out my Gansey Tambies, and these are gem colors. I love these because there's 6 beautiful hues that you can use on just about any card. And I'm getting that gold going, adding a bunch of water to it, just so it's splatterable. See, I'm going to use that word for the rest of this video. Okay. Checking it out on my mat, and that's another thing about the stencil mats is you can get paint all over it as well. It's really easy cleanup. I just throw it in the sink and give it a little scrub, and it's good to go. So there's my gold splatter. We're going to let that dry. And I'm getting in here. I'm going to audition my flowers. My ink is still wet, so I'm living on the edge here. And I think I'm going to place these flowers this way. So now I need to go and find a sentiment that I can die cut and stick in there. So while I was additioning those flowers, I decided that maybe my background was going to look a little boring. So I dug out my Pinkfresh diagonal stitched rectangles, and I'm going to add a frame to my cards. So I'm going to take the two inside pieces, and I'm just going to pop them over top of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of white hammermill cardstock. And I'm going to put them down with the best ever craft tape, and I'm going to run it through the machine to make a frame. And I ended up doing this twice because the first one was a little bit fragile, so I decided by cutting them a couple of times I could glue it together and make it a little bit more substantial. And 2 was fine, 3 would be awesome. So here's my glued together frame, a little bit more substantial now that there's 2 of it. And I want to pop this up a little bit, and here's something I like to use, and I use these for my shaker cards as well. This is from Doris, and these are strips of foam. So you know how you get foam squares to pop your flowers up on your cards? This is foam strips for frames and for edges, for numerous things, and you can get them in a couple of different lengths, and I quite love them. And I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching me go all the way around this card. Okay, so once again, I'm doing a dry fit, an addition I like to call it, where I'm putting all my elements on my card to make sure that I truly do love it before I start gluing things down. So I'm doing my card base. It's 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, scoring and folding at 4 1/4. Again, this is Hammermill 100. This paper is so much whiter than anything else. You will find that if you use something else for your card front, or in my case, that little frame that I just made, that it's going to look brown or beige compared to a white card base. So I just have changed everything over to Hammermill. That's all I'm using. So here's a quick tip when you're having to put a card front on top of a card base and you want to get it straight. Pop it into the corner of your MISTI after you take your foam out. Add some adhesive to the back of your card front, as I am going to do right about here. And you see you get a second chance on the back of your cards, right? I didn't like that blend, so I used the other side. So just add some adhesive to the back, put that thing into the top left-hand corner, and then when you put your card front in, angle it, and then lay it down, and it just goes in there perfectly. There's your tip for the day. Okay, so I found a sentiment that I liked. It was Simon Says Stamps Happy Birthday script, because I'm trying to stockpile my birthday cards for 2022. And so then final dry fit, got all my pieces, got my sentiment. I cut it in 3 different pieces and stacked them all and glued them together. Went to put it down and it doesn't quite fit. It's covering up my pretty flowers. So here's a quick solution. Flip your card. Okay, lay it in there, try and get them in there the way you want them, and put your sentiment in there. Fits much better this way. Now I'm a happy girl. Okay, so I'm going to remove the protective covers from the back of that frame with the foam on the back of it from Doris, attaching it to the center of my card. And then we're going to add the sentiment, and I'm going to use my Barely Art glue for that because I need the fine tip on it. Love this stuff. It's got a nice fine tip. So add your white glue to the back. Also gives you a couple of seconds to maneuver it around just in case you don't hit it in exactly the right spot or you get it a little bit crooked. You got a couple seconds there that you can straighten it out when you're using liquid glue, which I appreciate. I seldom get things on there straight. Okay, so flipping this over and adding it to the top right-hand corner of my card, just like that. Don't forget to stick your pin back in the glue and put the lid back on it. And then we're moving on. We're going to be starting to add our flowers. And we've got the frame jacked up with some foam strips, so we need to do the same thing to the flowers. So I've got a couple of foam squares here. I'm just going to add them to a couple of the wider parts in the center on the back to make sure that it stays nice and flat, and then I'll be gluing the pieces that are overlapping the frame. Okay, so just adding my foam squares to where I think I want my cards to go, my flowers to go. And I'm going to work one piece at a time, just making sure that I'm trying to keep as much as I can inside that card. Without the leaves hanging out over the edge, I'm going to get bent in my envelope. Okay, so just attaching them and then again coming back in with the glue and just adding a little dab behind any of the leaves that are overlapping that frame. And that keeps everything kind of nice and smooth and up where it should be, but nice and flat as well. Okay, and I'm going to add the second one, do the same thing. Final embellishments, Pinkfresh Essentials Jewel Mix. Love these things, love the colors. There is a light blue and a teal in these. I'm going to do a combination of the two of them, and they fit perfectly with the theme that I have going on in my background of all these different size circles and different colors, but they're kind of all in the same color family, so they really are blending together quite nicely without being garish, I think. So I'm using my embellishment wand to pick them up with, and I am going to glue them down with that nice fine point on my Barely Art glue. And that's it. That's my finished card. So I hope you enjoyed today's card, and I hope you'll give it a try. It is a fairly easy one, although maybe a little time consuming, but I did have fun with it. All of the supplies that I used today are listed underneath this video. There's also a link over to my blog where you can download a PDF that has all of the cutting instructions, the measurements, etc., and step-by-step instructions as well. And while you're over on my YouTube channel, please pick the subscribe button and hit that little bell, and you will get an announcement every time I load a new video. Until next time, toodles!